and welcome to the August 21st regular meeting of the Commission End Homelessness. Supervisor Sarmiento is unable to attend today's meeting, so as the Vice Chair of the Commission, I will be leading the meeting. And we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and Commissioner Cunningham has agreed to do that.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. So the agenda today contains a brief general description of each item to be considered, accepted as provided by law. No action shall be taken on any item not appearing on the agenda. The Commission End Homelessness encourages public participation. If you wish to speak on any items appearing on the agenda or during general public comments, please complete a speaker request form and turn it in to the clerk prior to the reading of the item. Speakers will be given 3 minutes to speak. The clerk will run the timer and announce when your time is up. Public comments may be submitted electronically by emailing response@ocgov.com. And with that, we'll move on to roll call. So Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Please indicate your presence when I call your name. Commissioner Sarmiento, Commissioner Wagner.
Here.
Commissioner Vanderpool, Commissioner Kim, Commissioner Rose, Commissioner Parks, Commissioner Hawley, Commissioner Dimitropoulos, Commissioner Bustamante Pixa, Commissioner Hurst, Commissioner Tuan,
Here.
Commissioner Davis, Commissioner Ivins, Commissioner Spitzer.
Leslie Young for Commissioner Spitzer.
Thank you. Commissioner Cunningham.
Here.
Commissioner Afable.
Here.
Commissioner Wyatt.
Here.
Commissioner Peineman. Commissioner Bruno Nelson.
Here.
Commissioner Rios Faust. Commissioner Morse.
Here.
Thank you, Vice Chair. We do have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Okay, housekeeping item. As a reminder, please be aware the room is hot mic'd for live stream of the meeting. Additional microphones are placed on the table in front of you. And commissioners, please speak into the microphone so it may pick up your comments for the live stream. And please try to keep side conversation to a minimum as it may be picked up on the microphone throughout the room. At this time, we'll take public comments from any members of the public wishing to speak on non-agenda topics that are under the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission. So, Madam Clerk, do we have any requests to speak?
Yes, we have 2 speakers. Our first speaker under general public comments is Paul Hike.
Nice to meet you people. This is my first meeting of this particular board. What we need to bring in to our shelters is medical. We can do that by getting nurses that are graduating out of college and schools. And as long as they're paid, they can practice their medicine. Because in the past, I've seen security take like metformin from a diabetic or their test kit, the parts to test with. Oh, you don't need this, we can't have this, we can't have this. 30 minutes later, they're having a diabetic emergency. And if you want to know this, when you have a diabetic emergency and you call the paramedics, you just spent $387 of your budget per call. For an example, San Diego was $400. Also, on your staffing, when you're hiring your staff or volunteers, ask them if they're certified, because they can do basic first aid. Like people get scrapes, for the women, the way I'm talking, don't feel offended. Panty liners, nosebleeds, the insertals or the OBs, pad and elbow, diaper, newborn, or any diaper. Basically, you're just getting it covered up so they can get to the medical. And, oh yeah, on the busing, on the winter shelters, they need to be all walk in, walk out. No more of this bus only. And as I have a feeling I know who instigated that one, I have found a rather crooked judge whose wife put me on the street. Don F. Gaffney, Superior Court Judge in Fullerton. He's also corrupt with Animal Cruelty, his daughter, and she put me on the street, sold my truck. We don't even think it's just a bill of sale, and that's illegal in California.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Carrie Buck.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for having me here today to be able to make a statement. As you're talking about grants passed or listening to a presentation later, I just want you I'm from the Family Solutions Collaborative, and I just want you to put a family frame around what you're deciding. Things that have impact on one one group of people might have a different impact on families. Families tend to be hidden. They stay in their cars. They are not out on the street, but there is a definite fear of what happens if I now encounter law enforcement in the situation that I'm in as a person that might be experiencing homelessness with children. It's very frightening. They already tend to be a little hidden, and I really worry that they'll become more hidden as we move forward. As long as we make sure that we have families and children in mind and frame things around there separately, I think that we'll have more success to have an impact on what's happening with families in Orange County. We have over 500 in the coordinated entry system that are waiting for housing throughout the whole county, and a number of them are family sizes 1 to 3. Pregnant moms or in the middle of reunification, and those are harder to find housing for. The vouchers and the rapid rehousing is not available for them at this point, and we don't have enough units out there for this particular group. So please consider, as you're talking through things, what happens to families when you're making policy changes or thinking about how to impact or to now take care of things now that grants pass is kind of on the play. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We have no further speakers for public comments.
Thank you. So now move to the agenda item for today's meeting, and we'll begin with our discussion item. Madam Clerk, will you please read the first item?
Yes, item 1 is the Office of Care Coordination update, which includes updates on membership, the bylaw ad hoc, the cold weather shelter ad hoc, inclement weather request for proposals, the 2025 survey, and the tiny home ad hoc. And we have one request from the public to speak on this item. Our speaker is Michelle Darmany.
Hello, thank you everyone for giving me this time to speak. I come from Alianza Trans Latinx, and I am a peer navigator for their housing program. We specifically deal with the TGI, transgender, gender nonconforming, and intersex community in Orange County, which is a demographic of people that are very misrepresented. And when pertaining to the survey, when we were coming to the county to bring up our concerns and our needs directly impacting our community, there were no numbers. We're not included in the demographics. They tend to just branch us in together, specifically with the LGBTQ+A, not understanding that our demographic is a demographic that has very specific needs and is very underrepresented. Here in the city of Orange County, or in the county of Orange, there are no shelters that allow women, such as myself, access into these shelters, into women's shelters, unless there's a specific space allocated separately for them. That's where we're at. None of my clients have any services provided for them, not even a drop-in center for them to go and take a shower. So when it comes to the TGI community specifically, our numbers don't exist, and that's why our organization created our own survey so that we can produce those numbers so that when we go up to the county to ask for the specific needs that we have, that we're able to back that up with numbers because we're not represented in these surveys oftentimes than not. So I just want you to keep that in mind when you're discussing this. When it comes to services based on people who are unhoused, the emphasis is on family units, and it isn't really on the single person. And those services lack significantly, and especially when it comes to the TGI community. And I find it to be disheartening that so many of my clients live out in the street under overpasses and have no access to any services. And they come to our organization, and we're trying to find a needle in a haystack that doesn't exist. And it makes them feel like the County of Orange, with it being conservative, does not want them here, and that their presence is not welcome. And the type of discriminations that they experience with the local police that arrest them from being out in the street and label them as sex workers continues to increase. So it's unfortunate that a lot of our clientele can get a hot meal and a roof over their head if they get arrested. So that's the only comment I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no further public comments on this item.
Before we begin with the agenda, I want to take a moment to welcome our newly appointed commissioner, Cecilia Bustamante-Pixa. Ms. Bustamante-Pixa is the Senior Director of Community Health, Orange County at St. Joseph Hospital, and fills the commission's hospital representative seat. So welcome. Doug, would you please provide the update for us?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to this month's commission meeting, and I also want to say thank you, and we're excited to have you, Commissioner Pixa, on board. I have just a handful of updates today to provide on this item. So first, looking at our bylaw ad hoc. At our last meeting, the commission voted on the creation of a bylaw ad hoc directed to review the commission's bylaws and come back with potential revisions that better align with today's commission that we see today. As you can see here, the chairman has worked with our office to create an ad hoc, and the group met earlier this month. Each member of the ad hoc is currently reviewing a red line draft that incorporates the thoughts and feedbacks that were discussed in our first meeting. We have an additional meeting coming up in September, and we hope to come back with an update in our October meeting. Cold weather shelter ad hoc. So the cold weather shelter ad hoc did not meet in the last 2 months. But what we want to update here today is that our office is in the process of establishing and releasing a request for proposal that reflects the two main recommendations presented by that ad hoc. The ad hoc first emphasized how inclement weather occurs throughout the year, not just during the cold season or due to low temperatures. So that essentially stating that we need to have an inclement weather response throughout the year. The second recommendation focused on the importance of a scattered site model, one that had locations for inclement weather emergency shelter throughout the county and not just one centralized location that people had to travel to, or the host city had an burden of stake in. The RFP that our office is working on releasing in the next few weeks will seek a provider that is willing to lead and coordinate an inclement weather shelter program that can be activated during a variety of inclement weather situations, regardless of time of year, and will create a network of shelter locations and beds throughout the county. From my next update, I'll briefly focus on our 2025 survey, or what we're calling a survey at the moment. As many of you will recall after we reported on the 2022 point in time count results at this commission, You all, as a commission, directed me and my office to evaluate the potential of conducting a 2023 point-in-time count. Our office came back and informed the commission that for several reasons, conducting a 2023 point-in-time count was not doable, but that we suggested using that off year as a chance to learn more and dig deeper into our 2022 results. And as you may remember, that resulted in us conducting a 2023 survey focusing on understanding the experiences of people who have been out on the street for quite some time, what they were looking for in a system, what were things that they have utilized that they liked, what were things that, and changes that they were looking for that might encourage them to come in at a greater rate. Today, I come to inform you all that our office is interested in utilizing this upcoming year to conduct a survey that will help us better understand the 2024 point-in-time count. We're interested in creating a survey/study to better understand specifically the almost 50%, as you see up here, 48.33% of people who, when surveyed, reported that they were experiencing homelessness for the first time in the past 12 months. We will be working with technical consultants to create a survey and a study that will ask folks who've become homeless for the first time in the last year questions related to their entry into homelessness. The questions will focus on understanding what their life experiences was just prior to entering homelessness and what the situation or reason they lost housing, what services were or were not utilized / available before becoming homeless, and those right after. With that said, we will also be seeking assistance from members of this commission and our COC to help us refine, update, and finalize exactly what the methodology and survey will look like. So there'll be plenty more to come on this topic in future meetings. Lastly, we originally planned for the Tiny Home Ad Hoc to present their final report to the commission at today's meeting, but due to the timing of the grants pass decision and the interest to discuss that decision in today's meeting, we felt that there was not enough time to cover both topics, and so we will be having the Tiny Home Ad Hoc present its report at our October meeting. And with that, that covers all of my updates. I'll hand it back over to the chair.
Thanks, Doug. We'll open it up to discussion with the commission.
I have a few topics to bring up on. Get closer. Yeah, thank you. I turned it on. It didn't help if I didn't get close, right? So I was first on the bylaws. I read through the bylaws as they were passed out at the last meeting to give us a heads up that we were going to set up a committee. Actually, I thought they were relatively good. I mean, I could have made an argument here or there, but I didn't see anything in them that caused me to say that they're inappropriate. But what I struck me as I read them was that we don't actually have a plan to put these bylaws into action. There's no action that we work with here as a commission to instantiate these bylaws into effective advice to the Board of Supervisors, which we have as our role. And I have a few examples of that, but I also want to back up a little bit. When this quote new commission now was established in 2018, I think, because the previous commission that had done the strategic plan sort of faded away and wasn't meeting anymore. That previous commission had created a strategic plan, a 10-year plan for ending homelessness in the county. And it was there's a lot of work that went into the plan, and it was extraordinarily well thought out plan, but it was never put into action. So basically at some point, having the plan didn't result in anybody who owned putting actions behind it, and or at least monitoring that actions were behind it, and things faded away. And we're several years into this new committee, and when in the first, I would say in the first year, and maybe a bit longer, we would have a long stream of people waiting to speak to us at the beginning of the meeting with lots of issues, because there was a lot of expectations that we would act and create impact. And I would say I've been a member of that committee since then. I think we haven't done a good job of that. We don't have many people up at our public speaking and other comments, because the expectations that we will actually get something done seem to have been lowered, and that's disappointing. I think it should be disappointing to all of us. So in coming back to the bylaws, when I looked at the first statement in here was work with the community and interested stakeholders to promote effective responses to homelessness. There should be, as I view, a number of ad hocs working with those now who are continuing to say what basically who are we working with? What stakeholders have we identified? How are we working with them? How out of that are we creating a set of advice? How are we monitoring? Once we do that, that action is actually resulting in creating an effective response. And in the second one, where the act as an advisory to the Board of Supervisors, having no dependent authority to act on matters such as legislative funding for lobbying, again, there should be a number of actions that we should be coming on and voting to actually suggest an action that the Board of Supervisors should take to accomplish this. And I could go through all of the various bylaws, but all of them, in my view, lack an action plan behind them where we're meeting and we're discussing the actions, making recommendations. We should be having a steady stream of recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. That is our role. And we should be monitoring whether those recommendations, one, are enacted or kicked back if need be, and two, whether those actions are resulting in the intent laid out here in our bylaws. So I would just encourage the ad hoc committee to expand beyond thinking about the bylaws that we've have stated, good bylaws for the and talk about how these bylaws are driving an action plan and recommendations for action plans to our Board of Supervisors, and how effective we are at following up on those actions and and adjusting and advising them as we need to. So anyway, I would just bring that up for a topic that I think is worth discussing here. I have some comments also on the survey, but I'll wait and come back to that if there's some other comments on the bylaw first. So I will pause that.
Doug, last year, and maybe even the year before, when we put an RFP out for the cold weather shelters, we got no response or limited response, and then it was December and it was January, and then we were scrambling, and fortunately Anaheim stepped up and did something. So I wondered if there's a bit of a provision for lack of a response to the RFP that has been put out, and what are we thinking as far as cold weather shelter and how this will come about?
Yeah, I think so I appreciate that. I think our main focus is this RFP. We're putting a lot of energy in crafting something that we believe proposers would be interested in. Also, a model that we believe the rest of the community would be willing, embrace potentially more than, our previous models. So we're hopeful we'll see a response there. Like everything we do in our office, we have, we're constantly considering what we will do in case we do not get responses. But I wouldn't want to necessarily go there at the moment. I think our energy is definitely interested in having a successful RFP.
Sorry, hi. So I actually was going to ask something very similar to Dr. Afable's question. For the RFP, last year, cities were the only institutions that could apply. Is there a possibility, and maybe that's what this is saying here, that non-for-profits could apply for this RFP?
Yeah, so the RFP will be open to, we're seeking a provider. We're really seeking partnership as well. We are crafting it in a way that makes it open to if there is a city that wants to partner. Understanding that we're looking for a scattered site model that would be in more than just one city. We believe that there's a way to work with, more than one vendor if that's the case. Last year, our interest, technically we released a request for proposal 2 summers ago, and we did not receive responses back. Last summer, we reached out after the cold weather shelter, that cold weather shelter ad hoc had convened. We reached out specifically to mayors of cities and their CC, their city managers. So it was a specific call to cities last year, and fortunately, Anaheim, we were able to come up with a program with Anaheim. So this, as reported before, our ad hoc this year, like it was last year, is really trying to learn from our previous experiences. This is, as all of you know, a really hot topic here in Orange County with many different views and perspectives, and rolling out, whether it's an inclement weather shelter response, especially one that's throughout the county, requires a lot of partnership. We try to be as methodical and collaborative as we can. So essentially, yes, we will be seeking both providers and jurisdictions if interested.
And the county will work with the city so that they are open to these not-for-profits that may apply?
Yeah, we, with all of our efforts, whenever we're in a city, we work closely with that host city to ensure that we are in line with their efforts and their interests.
Other comments?
I want to comment on the survey briefly. We did a survey 2 years ago now, I guess. So we have a fair amount of data. When we did the 2019 point-in-time count, we changed the question list specifically to learn more about those that we met on the street, not so much in the shelter, but those who were on the street. We added a lot of questions, and while we never released the detailed data for that, which I still will contend is a mistake on the part of the county to not have that data available so it could be mined and learn more. We did do a full report in addition to the summary report that exposed more of the data. And looking from that data, in fact, I think Doug brought up a number earlier, but I think the number of people who became homeless for the first time in that were exposed in that report, it was at, is it 42.8%. So it's been very consistent in the 40% range over the data that we've been able to collect. The reasons the questions that were asked were summarized even in the full report, so you couldn't actually break down further in the causes, and so we could learn a lot more from that data. And in the 2022 point-in-time count, we asked the same set of questions, but we never produced a full report, only a high-level summary, so that data level and some of the others weren't exposed. And we did a survey and we learned a little more, and we didn't expose it. So my comment here is I'm not opposed to a survey But I am a bit concerned that generally, we would start out with a few hypotheses and build a survey to prove or disprove those hypotheses. But the data that we have where we might mine it and come up and look at those and that would raise questions that we could really use to build a survey, we don't have access to. I'd really like to encourage some way to get access to that data and overcome whatever reasons we have for not making it available, whatever they may be, and start to be able to look at that data for a variety of reasons, but in part in terms of driving the questions on the 2025 survey to be much more pointed and allow us to expose additional information that we wouldn't have available from that other set of data. So I really think that as a lead up to getting the survey together, working to try to get access to the previous data and use it would be very helpful.
Okay. Any other comments? Anybody want to share? Well, with that, we'll now move to today's presentation. Madam Clerk, would you please read the next item?
Yes, item 2 is a presentation titled U.S. Supreme Court Ruling Grants Pass, presented by Laura Knapp from County Council. And we have 3 requests from the public to speak on this item. And we'll start with our first speaker, Michael Shepard.
Hello, Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to share to you. My name is Michael Shepard. I'm the Associate Director of Community Strategies at United to End Homelessness and Orange County United Way. I would like to read from a petition that we have circulated among our housing advocates in preparation for this meeting. It reads that the Grants Pass ruling allows for cities to enforce anti-camping ordinances more broadly, but it does not require them to enact cruel policies and enforcement. Civic leaders still have a choice and a moral obligation to continue promoting the use of programs that have proven to be solutions for our unhoused neighbors. Solutions that center housing as the foundation for further support, treatment, and care. Our local police chiefs and homeless liaison officers often acknowledge that we can't arrest our way out of homelessness. Yet there are those in our community who believe that this short-sighted approach can bring change. Criminal activity needs to be addressed whether one is housed or unhoused, but to be fined or arrested for sleeping outside when you have nowhere else to go is only putting additional barriers in someone's way that add to their challenges of resolving their crisis. It is a short-term, ineffective solution and thus costly for our community too. This petition in a short time has been signed by over 100 residents of 22 cities in Orange County and continues to grow. United to End Homelessness has trained thousands of people across the county about solutions to homelessness. There is grassroots support for housing, and we continue to build the groundswell of support to end homelessness and housing insecurity. I have been a part of trying to solve homelessness since 2009. And despite the challenges we face now, we have never been in a better position to respond to the needs of some of our most vulnerable, marginalized, and maligned residents. We urge this commission to be bold in its vision and voice that we will not go back, that it will be clear from this body that housing ends homelessness, and that 34 cities, the county, service organizations, public serving agencies, the faith community, the business community, and everyone who desires for Orange County to be a place where everyone thrives can be united to end homelessness. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your discussion today.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Paul Hike.
For these winter shelters, we need, here. Now can everybody hear me? On these winter shelters, we need medical, nurses. We've even got ladies that are in-home aides that would help the nurses, like CNAs, which means if a client gets in good with them, they can turn around and become a companion and live with them when they get their housing. But we need to make sure that these winter shelters are accessible by the OCTA bus system. And if they're access, that access is allowed to come in and drop off. And we have to watch out for the hospital dumps. We had one year that was supposed to go to Fullerton, found out where we were, and she got dumped. And she was in a wheelchair. And they get dumped all over the place. Mostly the Amtrak stations, all kinds of places. And the thing is, to feed these people, we need to have the churches checked for their kitchens to make sure they're all A qualified, either by Laguna or federal, because I got a case of food poisoning through chicken risotto with rice, and the rice showed up in the shelter in a styrofoam beer cooler as ice. That's how it was packed. And we need to make sure our homeless can come in and come in by public bus, not a charter, not wait for a bus by a certain time. And furthermore, one lady, she just did her laundry, was folding her clothes, put it in her backpack. She got busted for being homeless, and her clothes were taken from her, and she had to start all over from scratch. If I see Anaheim, I'm interested in being a helper in the winter shelter, even though I got housed. And we should have them, as they come in, be admitted and checked. And our security needs to have guard cards and get rid of Star Pro. They're bogus. They're no longer got a bond. They started in Seattle by an officer from Honolulu, and then they went to Oakland, and they packed guns. And our security in the shelters don't need to be packing sidearms.
Thank you. And our third and final speaker is Yasi Gobo.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and Chair. My name is Yasi Gobo. I'm here to provide remarks on behalf of Supervisor Sarmiento, who wished he could be here today. Nevertheless, I'm happy to read comments on his behalf. As you are all aware, the Supreme Court recently ruled in favor of Grants Pass, overturning the previous Boise decision. While we respect this new law, we hope it will be used and implemented judiciously only as... Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Okay.
While we respect this new law, we hope it'll be used judiciously and only as a last resort by cities. After years of hard work, the county, as well as many cities, have developed a robust system of care, including almost 2,500 shelter beds in the county. Millions of dollars of investment have been made throughout the county and within the Civic Center area. They've all been for the benefit of our communities and to provide compassionate services. Our goal is to maintain these robust outreach efforts and services, ensuring we do not revert to the challenges we previously faced. During my tenure as Santa Ana council member and mayor, we saw de facto transferring of unhoused individuals between SPA lines through arrests for minor infractions. Often, these individuals were released in just a couple of days in the middle of the night and had no services to turn to. So as we approach a method to implement this new law, we have to keep the past in mind and make sure we don't create a situation that has foreseeable consequences. As we move forward with implementing this new law, it is crucial to remember these past challenges to avoid foreseeable negative consequences. We've heard similar concerns from the local council members, so we have started to engage and are engaging with the governor's office, the sheriff's department, and the city managers in the 2nd District to discuss these issues and explore collaborative solutions. We hope that the commission will serve as a forum for thoughtful and honest discussions about minimizing the disproportionate impact on cities hosting the jail and exploring a regional approach to addressing the new law. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And we have no further public comments on this item.
So in June of this year, United Supreme County issued its decision on Johnson versus the City of Grants Pass. This presentation will provide a brief background of the case and a summary of the decision. At this time, I'll turn it over to Doug for a brief introduction before the presentation from Supervising Deputy with the County Council, Ms. Knapp.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair. So before handing it over to Laura Knapp from our County Council, I want to say a few words that'll hopefully help set the stage for our presentation and discussion. The Grants Pass decision by the Supreme Court has been one of the more monumental decisions regarding homelessness on a national level that we've seen in quite some time. We, and I've heard from many commissioners, feel it incredibly important that our commission, one that is the Commission to End Homelessness, recognizes and discusses this decision. With that said, we're all aware that this commission is an advisory body that does not have direct control over homeless services, our homeless service system, but it is a commission of 21 members who are leaders throughout our county, albeit from a variety of different areas. And we have created a framework document, this commission has, through our Pillars report, that provides a set of best practices and guiding principles that cover outreach and similar services. So with that said, we thought it important and valuable for the commission to have a discussion on the different impacts this decision is having throughout our community, while also providing an opportunity to elevate any potential areas of focus or collaboration needed in our community. This discussion appears to be timely, as well as many of us in our varying roles are still figuring out how exactly to move forward from this ruling. So I hope that this conversation will help shape that direction as well. Before we have the conversation, we want to take a few minutes to go over the Grants Pass decision, give some history on the case, and specifics on exactly what the decision ruled on. We're very lucky to have Laura Knapp here, a supervising deputy at our county council, and someone who's represented the county for quite some time through all litigation matters representing homeless services here at the county. She's been with us through the Riverbed and the Civic Center and working directly with Judge Carter and our team every day since. Laura is our leading expert in this area, so we really thank and appreciate you, Laura, for joining us. And I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. Hello, thank you, board. Thank you, Doug. And I should caveat that and say I'm one of many of a large team of attorneys that work under the leadership of our county counsel, Leon Page, that work on homeless issues, including the litigation stemming from the riverbed, et cetera. I'm happy to be here, and I thought I would start with the case that led up to Grants Pass, Martin v. Boise, which governed homeless law for a long time up until the recent decision came out. So Martin v. Boise was a Supreme Court case that delved into the issue of whether the Eighth Amendment's prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment bars a city from arresting people for sleeping outside on public property when those individuals have no home or other shelter to go to. And back then, which was in 2018, I believe, the court held, yes, it does. It is an Eighth Amendment violation, and the Eighth Amendment precluded enforcement of statutes prohibiting outdoor sleeping against individuals who had no access to shelter on the false premise that they had a choice in the matter. And that case essentially held that you cannot criminalize homelessness and that you needed to have a shelter bed.
For the record, you said it was a Supreme Court case. It's a Ninth Circuit case.
I apologize. It's a Ninth Circuit
Just so we
case.
know.
Yes, I apologize.
It
My
wasn't the
apologies.
Supreme Court.
I'm thinking Grants Pass. I apologize. Whether or not a shelter bed was needed prior to arrest of a homeless individuals for status offenses, and that court held, yes, it is. And there was a lot of language in that case, which I'm not going to go into about what constitutes adequate shelter, but that confusion led to a lot of difficulties with local governments trying to understand the decision and what it required. But in short, the arguments were made by plaintiff's counsel that you needed a shelter bed for every homeless individual. So I'm just going to jump to Grants Pass, which was a case up in Oregon where several homeless individuals challenged the city of Grants Pass passed an ordinance that was fairly strict, and it prohibited camping or sleeping in public spaces. The plaintiffs argued that they had no other place to go and that the city's ordinances violated their Eighth Amendment right against cruel and unusual punishment. The case worked its way through the courts and, as we all know, ended up in this U.S. Supreme Court this past year. The legal question was presented was, do local ordinances imposing criminal penalties on acts such as public sleeping or camping violate the Eighth Amendment's cruel and unusual punishment prohibition if they apply to unhoused persons who lack shelter options? And the answer was a resounding no, it does not violate the Eighth Amendment to, I'm just going to go back to my notes, the enforcement of generally applicable laws regulating camping on public property does not constitute cruel and unusual punishment prohibited by the Eighth Amendment. So this was a clarification that multiple county, local, state agencies throughout the country asked the Supreme Court to hear and decide. And essentially, the Grants Pass decision gives local governments greater ability to enact and enforce criminal penalties for acts such as public camping or sleeping outside, even in localities where limited local shelter space contributes to these acts. Martin v. Boise essentially is overturned. That is no longer good law. That case is no longer good law. And the Eighth Amendment's prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment regulates the type of punishment a locality can impose for an offense, not whether the locality can or should punish the offense to begin with. So the Supreme Court strongly disagreed with the Ninth Circuit, thank you Supervisor Wagner, their interpretation of whether or not the Eighth Amendment is truly violated here. In upholding Grants Pass ordinances, the Supreme Court stated that the ordinances that publish certain acts, regardless of the underlying circumstances, do not constitute a violation. And I'm going to quote here, under the city's laws, it makes no difference whether the charged defendant is homeless, a backpacker on vacation passing through town, or a student who abandons his dorm to camp out and protest on the lawn of a municipal building. Localities contemplating similar laws should ensure that they are written and enforced to punish acts regardless of the charged defendant's circumstances. So the Supreme Court took a very different approach, and they did not believe that this ordinance was punishing a violation of the Eighth Amendment by punishing the act of being homeless. Rather, it is conduct. So the Supreme Court recognized the difficulties with the Martin standard. They focused on the Martin v. Boise requirement that a locality must provide adequate shelter, asking questions such as, how is a city to know whether the accommodations it provides to unhoused persons will provide adequate in later litigation? As a result, the Grants Pass decision essentially holds that localities may impose criminal penalties for acts such as public camping and public sleeping without violating the Eighth Amendment, even if they lack sufficient available shelter space to accommodate their unhoused population. It's important to note that the decision did go into quite a bit of detail about the importance of outreach, engagement, and providing services to homeless individuals is extremely important. The last thing I have to say is that I think it's important to note that although Grants Pass is a significant and important decision, plaintiffs, including the Plaintiffs' Council that the county has faced, has made it very clear that they're open to suing over other options, such as violation of due process, civil rights violations, and violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Those are the basis of other cases involving our same Plaintiffs' Council in other counties. So although this case is significant, it certainly does not limit the scope of liability from a lawyer's perspective. There are lots and lots of options available to Plaintiffs' Council other than the Eighth Amendment that they can sue under. Thank you for the time. I don't have anything further.
Thank you, Ms. Knapp. Let's open it up for discussion.
I'm sorry, Chairman. So our presentation, we want to cover a few other things, but I think it would be really good to pause here just in case there's technical questions for Laura about specifically Grants Pass, not necessarily the implications here in our community, but about the legal decision. Right, seeing none. We're going to get into the executive order.
Well, I mean, rather than whisper up here, I mean,
Yeah,
my question is, there are two problems. One, Grants Pass got a lot of publicity, and I know and colleagues of mine on my board or on city councils are hearing from their residents, oh my gosh, now that you've got Grants Pass, go out and arrest them. And that isn't the response we're taking, isn't best practices, and there are constraints, the Catholic worker settlement being an important one. And so I'm curious, thoughts on that, and if you're going to expand on what we can or can't do here locally, even though we could, if Grants Pass were the only thing that constrained us, and it just isn't.
I had not planned on going into our settlement, but I'm happy to give a brief overview.
Well, I ask because it is the constraint that we're all getting. I mean, I'm hearing mayors tell me, you need to help me with the sheriff because the sheriff won't enforce Grants Pass.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, I defend the sheriff. They are misreading the legal landscape, in my opinion, because Grants Pass, good as it is, and I argued for it, does not really control here because of the settlement agreement that we've entered into. So I'm kind of looking to unpack all of that. If the public wants to understand Grants Pass here in Orange County.
Certainly. Would you like me to give a brief overview of our settlement? Okay. Thank you. The county was part of a significant, very large lawsuit involving a TRO in the Riverbed, which started in 2019, which was after Martin and clearly before Grants Pass. And that litigation was before Judge David Carter and ultimately was resolved with a comprehensive settlement agreement, not only addressing the applicability of the laws, but also it created a very detailed standards of care that were approved by the homeless litigants as well, outlining how the shelters were to operate. It also discussed where enforcement and how enforcement should take place, putting forth the idea that coordinated care system, health, I used to call them blue shirts, forgive me, but healthcare workers, the incredible outreach workers should always go first, and warnings and notices should be provided. That settlement remains intact. It has been called by Judge Carter a model for the nation. It has, I venture to say, extremely successful. It has worked for several years and has a dispute resolution procedure in it that is quite detailed and works to resolve disputes immediately rather than through litigation. And I'm not sure if I answered your question, Supervisor.
Well, I know that. I mean, I was looking to get out on the record here to the commission, to the public, the idea that though Grants Pass is there, and we hear public commenters coming and talking about Grants Pass, it isn't really the operative law in this county because of these other constraints.
Grants Pass is the law of the Supreme Court. Yes, it is the law. However, we have entered into a settlement agreement with more specific detail and rules regarding how enforcement of any removal of encampments, et cetera, takes place. So that's correct.
So I appreciate that, and I think the other piece is from my understanding, and Laura and Supervisor, please correct me if I'm wrong, our settlement agreement, the settlement agreement we're a part of, the county is the party to the settlement agreement, and local cities are not under a settlement agreement, so they have more flexibility, and Grants Pass has a greater impact there. I wanted to also briefly cover the governor's executive order. I don't disagree with the comment you made about the governor's executive order, but one of the reasons I want to cover it is because it followed Grants Pass. It was obviously strongly worded. Several cities that I've talked to are utilizing that executive order or have stated to me that they'll utilize that executive order as an ability to create an ordinance, sort of leaning on that as a chance to create an ordinance in their city, and also utilizing the framework of that executive order to copy in their ordinance. So Grants Pass decision came out at the end of June. July 25th, the governor issued an executive order which directed state agencies and departments to adopt clear policies and urgently address homeless encampments while supporting and assisting the individuals they're living in. The order encouraged local governments to adopt, keyword encouraged local governments to adopt policies consistent with the state's guidelines and to use all available resources and infrastructure, including resources provided by the state's investments in housing and intervention programs where appropriate and available. Yet again, the order encouraged local governments to take action with urgency to humanely remove encampments from public spaces. The order also stated that the California Interagency Council on Homelessness shall develop guidance and provide technical assistance consistent with the order for local governments to follow and implement in their homeless programs. Additionally, on this next slide here, it states that the agency and departments subject to my authority, yet again speaking specifically to his authority, generally should be generally consistent with the California Department of Transportation's maintenance policy directive to address encampments. And as you can see here, wherever feasible, site assessment in advance of removal operations to determine whether an encampment poses an imminent threat to life, health, safety, or infrastructure such that exigent circumstances require immediate removal. Where exigent circumstances exist, as much advance notice to vacate the removal. Vacate is reasonable under the circumstances. Where no exigent circumstances exist, posting a notice to vacate at the site 48 hours ahead of time, and the contacting of service providers to request outreach services for the persons experiencing homelessness at the encampment, and collecting, labeling, and storage for at least 60 days of personal property. I went through that list and went through the order for a couple of reasons. First, I think it's important to note that this executive order is specific to the state and what the governor has authority over it. Obviously states, and it states in there several times, that there's an encouragement for local cities and counties to align with this. One of the things that we take notice of, or our office takes notice of, is that through his announcement and in other statements that he's made it clear that essentially there's a possibility of holding back funds to local jurisdictions if those local jurisdictions are not meeting his expectation. Additionally, as I want to point out that, as you see here in the framework that he sets up, it essentially aligns with what we've been doing here in Orange County for quite some time. It really outlines what's in our settlement agreement and what has been in previous other groups' settlement agreements. I think the takeaway on the local level, or at least for the Office of Care Coordination, is the rhetoric around complying with a standard of exercise that the governor, meeting a standard that the governor has not yet exactly articulated, and the potential consequences of losing critical state funding. So this is one of the examples of how, and I want to mention this, how this subject and Grants Pass has a layered impact and a real interesting impact with many different decisions to be made. If you bear with me for a few more minutes, lastly, before we hand it over to having a discussion and opening it up to the commission, I did want to say a few other things. I wanted to point out that and give a little bit of context of what of our community here in Orange County to help create a little more depth, hopefully, to our conversation. First, we really wanted to point out the progress that you all are aware of that we've made since 2018, when the Riverbed and Civic Center were cleaned up. There was a very strong proactive engagement, proactive enforcement, and essentially a standard and strategy that we utilized through that cleanup and that our community has utilized since, that we've seen long-term success with. And that's heavily coupled with, as we all have said, housing and placing people. And as you can see here on the right, over the last 6 years, our community has housed over 12,000 folks. This is data that we pull out of our HMIS, our homeless management information system that we report up to the feds each year, that talk about the efforts of our community. So just trying to provide that context that we have been successful, we continue to be successful, utilizing a specific strategy. Additionally, as I think about the groups and the folks that we're talking about here, and thinking about some of the conversations that I know I've been a part of or heard since Grants Pass, is the essentially talking about some of the folks that that are living in these encampments and some of the folks experiencing homelessness on our street. And I'm remiss if I don't mention our 2023 survey that we referenced last agenda item. Two of the findings in that survey, I think, are ones that are important in this conversation. We saw that 93% of folks who were experiencing unsheltered homelessness, when we surveyed them, were engaged in some type of supportive service, showing a willingness to engage in the system somehow. An additional 2% were interested. So, over 90% of folks maybe not engaged in every service, but showing a willingness to move forward. And then we also asked folks, if you remember, what exactly are they seeking when engaging with an outreach worker? And the second most popular answer was housing assistance. Over 3/4 of the folks said that they were seeking housing assistance. So I know that, I'm sort of going, from sort of topic to topic here, but really want to, ensure that all of these different lenses and perspectives are a part of the discussion. And as I think of folks that say, of our survey, and folks showing that they're interested, thinking about how our shelters are full, knowing that we have a waiting list for our shelters. I go back to last meeting's presentation and our point-in-time data that shows, A, that for the most part our shelters are full, but B, that almost 3/4 of the folks that are in shelter have done everything they can to get into housing. The challenge is that we don't have, only 1 out of every 12 of those folks at the time of this study were connected to housing. So we have a real bottleneck when it comes to permanent housing, and where that comes to be so important in this discussion is thinking about if that bottleneck is eased up, the ability to offer more shelter and engage more folks and hopefully reduce the amount of folks on the street and the encampments that we're seeing. And then the last thing I'll say, and I'll be quiet after that, is I apologize. I want to use sort of the overly used iceberg analogy because I think it's actually applicable here. And I think it does a really good job of articulating a couple of points. So the first one and the obvious one, or the one that I've spoken about before is and touched on is when we look at our point-in-time count, roughly 43% of people experiencing homelessness in our community are in shelter. And then if we couple that with the 76% of the folks that are not in shelter stating that they are interested in some type of housing assistance, you get to see that a high majority of folks that are experiencing homelessness are interested in services. But there is a portion that, when we go out to them day in and day out, at that immediate moment, are not interested in services. And I think that those people are often the most visible in our community. And we sometimes forget that there is a large amount of folks that accept the services in our system. And the second example of where this iceberg analogy lands, I think, so well is we do have such a high majority of folks experiencing homelessness that are accepting services and moving forward. But yet again, the most visible folks to our community often are those that are in encampments and those that at times are often resistant to services. So I say all of that to not say, hey, listen, 95% of folks are engaging in services, we shouldn't do anything. I think the point of what I'm trying to get out as I pass it back over to the chair to open it up for discussion is the importance of, we do need to, I think it is important, we do hear what the Chairman Wagner mentioned, an interest from the community that we should be addressing encampments, and we should be doing it in the right way. And our previous success that we've had is not only doing it through a strategy that works, that's coupled with housing, but it's that is proactive. But what I hope does not happen is that decisions are not made about the entire homeless community that essentially address the tip of the iceberg, but negatively impact those that we have seen a lot of success with. So I appreciate everyone bearing with me, and I'll pass it back over to the chair.
Thanks, Doug. So I just want to see if I understand this. So with Grants Pass, it's a Supreme Court ruling, but because of the settlement locally, that has already provided us with a guideline how to operate and serve our folks experiencing homelessness, that there's already a guideline in place. But I think, Doug, I heard you say that the cities and municipalities also has a flexibility to implement their own approaches?
Yes, the settlement agreement that was referenced is a settlement agreement with the county. The cities are not party to a settlement agreement. Some were, but they are no longer. In our settlement agreement and those previous settlement agreements, it essentially outlined a strategy and a framework that was consistent with what the governor stated in his order, and I think consistent with a lot of folks' opinions on how to best work on addressing homelessness.
Okay, so I just have two questions as to the broader commission here. I'm wondering if any cities or if the sheriff's office have adopted, or is this too early, any policies or thoughts in how to approach this? And then the second part of that is, has there been any discussions on how we can approach this at a county level? Because we have a lot of municipalities packed into a very small geography. And so, can we coordinate and can we have a conversation as a commission-driven activity or a county-driven?
Thanks. Jack, if I can answer some of those from the sheriff's perspective. Right now, the Sheriff Barnes is not changing our stance on how we're doing outreach and enforcement. So we're still going out and offering services to those who will accept them. However, we do have, like we've talked about, those service-resistant individuals, and it's what I'm understanding is we're going to start doing a little bit more enforcement on that end now. I work now. I'm being the chief of Mission Viejo. I'm getting a lot of the same questions from my city council and my mayor what are we doing now that Grants Pass is the law of the land? Can we go and start taking down these encampments? Luckily, Mission Viejo, we don't have a big problem there, but we do have some. And the concern is, yes, we can, most of them are on private property, go take them down. But do we want to be on the receiving end of another lawsuit? So that's what another concern is. And, you know, Laura mentioned it in her presentation. There are other areas that we can be sued on. I don't want to have the county be named in a lawsuit. But as far as the sheriff's concerned, we're still doing outreach and enforcement. We're still going out, offering services that we can. However, if those individuals that will accept services, if we don't have a place to put them, we're kind of back to square one again. What are we doing with them? So, but yeah, we do have a lot of those service-resistant individuals that we have to do something with, and who's going to prosecute those? I don't know. So, city attorneys for the muni codes, yes. The DA's office for in the county areas, yes, I hope so. So that's where we're at with Sheriff's Department.
Courtney. I think this one's dead. I'll just share with the commission, as chair of the North Orange County Public Safety Collaborative, working with the cities in the North Spa, I can share a little bit about what's happening in the north, what our plans are, what we've discussed. Regarding the settlement agreement that Supervisor Wagner brought up, we were a party of that. However, last year, we decided to terminate that agreement, and we are no longer beholden to that in the north. In light of the Grants Pass decision coming to fruition, even prior to that decision being made, we started talking, figuring that, hey, we should be prepared and start deciding on a course of action. So we started meeting, and those meetings continue. But what I think it's important to share is that we all take a thoughtful approach to this, that we don't immediately rush to judgment or take actions that now make us subject to a new litigation or lawsuit and aren't in the best interest of all the stakeholders that are involved in this really complex problem. You know, we've worked hard in the north, in particular, over the past 6+ years to build a variety of end-to-end services, starting with outreach and hopefully ending in positive exits to permanent housing or reunifications. And it's not our intent to abandon any of that outreach and those services that we work very hard to do. In fact, one of the speakers mentioned earlier, and I agree, I think there's an opportunity to enhance some of these services. Medical, for example, street medicine is super important and lacking at our shelters, as is substance abuse and mental health treatment opportunities. Housing, we had a conversation about housing a few minutes ago. Our navigation centers, when I hear numbers such as the average length of stay is 6 months, or 9 months, or 12 months in a navigation center, that's not what they were designed for. But why is that? Well, we have a logjam or a bottleneck in transitional and permanent supportive housing that we can't move people to, who are interested, as Doug just mentioned, in housing. There's nowhere for them to go. So we're working with our cities on permanent housing projects and other opportunities like that. That all said, to Captain Ivan's point, there is a service-resistant segment of this population that creates issues in all of our communities, sometimes criminal issues, other times quality of life issues. And what Grants Pass does allow us to do now is, in conjunction with all of these offerings and outreach, have an opportunity to potentially help solve some of this problem that we have not been able to solve up to this point for those who had no motivation or desire to move and take advantage of these services that we've offered. On the north, we've gathered together all of our chiefs, all of our city managers, and our legal counsel, and we're having this very thoughtful discussion about what our next steps are. So I anticipate there's going to be more to come, but I also know that it's not going to be done in a quick or rash manner, and it's going to be done in a very thoughtful and measured approach.
couple of things, and I don't necessarily disagree too much with what I heard before, although I think there's some nuances there. It is true the settlement agreement right now is only with the county and not any of the individual cities. That doesn't entirely help answer the question, however, because you've got a lot of cities that are patrolled by the sheriff's department. And then there's a separate legal question whether the agreement even applies to the sheriff's department. We all may have our own thoughts how that turns out, but I am certain that if the sheriff does something that is arguably in violation of that settlement agreement, the advocates for the homeless will bring a lawsuit and take their position. And the sheriff has been great in trying to avoid that. The other problem with the idea, oh, the cities aren't subject to the agreement, may be true, but if Brea cracks down on folks, a likely, maybe even an obvious thing is for them to go into, say, Yorba Linda, which is right next door, and is patrolled by the sheriffs. And so the city breakdown, city versus county, is only so good. I will in that sense disagree that North is out of the settlement agreement. It's not. The North spas and the Central spa are both still in Carter's courtroom. The settlement agreement is in Carter's courtroom. Yes, it only applies to the county as we operate up in the North Spa. Doesn't necessarily bind Brea, but at the end of the day, to pick an obvious one, but at the end of the day, there are limitations that our sheriff, for example, can't take people across spa lines in terms of enforcement, and that does still impact the North Spa. So nobody really gets a chance yet to go it alone. And the last thing I want to throw out there is that we hear a lot that, well, we can't arrest our way out of homelessness. Okay. But maybe we can, with a little more vigorous enforcement, arrest our way out of service resistance, which is just a real thing. And, finding the services and affording the services and providing them is a whole different challenge. But at the end of the day, the public is looking at us to, if necessary, arrest our way out of that service resistance.
If I could just piggyback on a comment you made, Supervisor, I really appreciate you bringing up that point. I think it's critical as we have these conversations that as different cities or entities within the county that we're sharing these ideas, because the last thing we want is a circumstance where you have, for example, one isolated city pass a maybe draconian city code and then displaces the problem to its neighboring city. That's a significant concern and definitely something that's on our minds. So I know that as we just happen to be grouped together as a spa in the north, we're having those conversations, but it's very important that we all collaborate on that issue. So thank you.
Commissioner Kim?
I appreciate all the discussions we're having. As it relates to the central spa cities, I would say a majority of the 9 cities already have some sort of anti-camping ordinance already in place. And so I think it's a good discussion and a good model to follow to continue to have collaborations and see where they anticipate future enforcements to be. For the City of Garden Grove, we lead by compassion. That has not changed. That continues to be the direction of our City Council, which is why we have a significant amount of robust resources that has been deployed over the last 24 months. With Be Well, street management in collaboration with Cal Altima and Healthcare in Action. We are also collaborating with Caltrans and secured some additional grant funding as it relates to addressing some of the encampments in their state right-of-way and providing us resources to address those directly. We are also focusing on achieving deliverable of permanent supportive housing. We worked with Milo and his team in delivering Garden Grove's first permanent supportive housing project, which yielded us 8 units. But the takeaway of delivering permanent supportive housing is funding. It requires a project-based voucher that is quite costly and is impactful. So there's a separate discussion in delivering that final outcome which everyone wants to accomplish, but there's a costly price tag associated with that. Because that takes away from other program activity as it relates to homeless prevention. Garden Grove has a very active housing authority and oversees 24 vouchers to our Garden Grove residents. And if it's augmented to permanent supporting housing projects, that shifts away from our current need in our community. So there's a lot of other conversations that are intertwined with this very robust discussions that we're having today. You know, I continue to learn on each of these discussions. I appreciate the supervisor's insight in guiding us through this really just unique circumstance. There's going to be, you know, just from this conversation alone, City of Garden Grove partners with HomeAid. They guided us when we advanced our Central Cities Navigation Center. That's a collaboration with 3 cities in the county. So I don't know what the right answer is, and I don't know what the right answer will be, but I do appreciate our discussion collectively, and I'll definitely pass that along to the Central SPA cities, and we'll continue to have ongoing dialogue and report back.
Thank you. Commissioner Hurst.
I appreciate the dialogue on the Grants Pass issue. Salvation Army is very active in this space nationwide with 508 shelters, providing 8 million nights of homeless shelter nationwide last year. This is a major issue we are engaged in on many fronts. I think the feedback we're hearing the most is the concern that there isn't enough shelters space. When you talk about enforcement, the issue of service resistant, and we appreciate what that means and respect the problem that causes in civic space. It is also counteracted by our shelters are at or near capacity, even in Orange County. I know our Anaheim Emergency Shelter has 325 beds. It averages 320 people a night. I think the recent data I've seen on a California statewide basis is we only have enough shelter capacity for about 50% of the unsheltered homeless in the state of California. So assuming we engage and step up some degree of enforcement, the question is, what are we going to compel them to do? And I think that's what the public is actually asking. And I would suggest that the housing issue, and I'll make this very broad, dramatic comment very short, the housing issue is probably much more severe than most of major stakeholders have our minds around, as evidenced by UCI's recent survey just released 2 weeks ago that said 51% of Orange County residents are considering leaving because of the cost of housing, and that's particularly acute with people under the age of 40. That's not homeless people, that's everybody. This housing issue is serious. Doug put a graph up there that said in the Yale and Kramer shelters, 1 out of 12 have been able to successfully exit into housing. This is just an extremely serious issue that has to couch what the response to Grants Pass is. What are we going to do when we step up enforcement? Thank you.
Thank you. Others? Yes.
Hi, thank you. I'm not sure what the right answer is, but I want to say that our county has made a lot of great strides in the last 6.5 years, and clearly we were forced to do that. But I think it helped us come together in a collaborative effort and really, really make great strides. And I don't want to see us take a step backwards. From HomeAid's end, obviously in the seat that I sit on this commission, my job is to build housing, and that's a difficult road and it's a long road. And if we begin to not work together, and it scares me in thinking that every city here can make their own decision and decide, well, I'm going to rest in Orange, but I'm not going to in Brea. We will step backwards. And I would encourage us to think about, let's not be afraid of a lawsuit, but let's be afraid of how we're treating our residents. Thanks.
Commissioner Penman.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm just looking at our bylaws and that, we're here to foster regional leadership that promotes resource development. We're here to promote greater community understanding of the complex dynamics underlying homelessness. So I just want to say a couple of things about this. I'm meeting with some of my neighbors this evening for iced tea and a cup after this meeting actually, and we talk about homeless in the streets in our neighborhood, and they say, "What can you do about it, Milo? We don't do outreach like that." But I have reached out to the outreach teams and said, "Well, who are those folks and what's the story?" And so I hear about the individual narratives of those their stories and where they're coming from and what they're struggling with. But my neighbors see people on the streets that are too close to where the gangs used to be, and they don't want that stuff to happen again. They see a generic set of faces that are unchanging, but in fact, they're individual human beings with an individual human narrative. And each of them, if you ask them questions, they answer them with motivations that make sense to most people. And if they don't, it's because they probably need help with their medication or support or engagement. And so for me, when I talk to them about this, I don't disagree with anything they're saying. I just see a path forward. That is the one that we've had this period of time where all the cities and county and jurisdictions have really been pushed to go further in the direction I think we all feel makes sense. It makes sense. It's practical, right? Fostering regional connections, the spirit of cooperation I see among multiple cities for partnering with shelters, for coming up with solutions, for jointly funding permanent supportive housing, for working under the umbrella of the county for how to refer people into housing, and with cost-effective, practical approaches, thinking how we can support system flow and housing, our housing stock kind of try and support that. And all that to me says something that I don't hear when I hear phrases like service resistant, or I don't hear when we talk about clearing encampments, which is the customer, the person in the middle of the conversation, who we're here to serve. And that's the mindset. And I remember my very first comment when I joined this commission. I shared this story when I used to work with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, and when they pushed homelessness among veterans down by 40% in just a 3-year period, because they had special advisors appointed out of D.C. who come and just say, you do this, and we don't have that. Right? We have to figure it out from our chairs and roles. We have to figure it out from a different place, maybe a better place, a healthier place in the long term. And so, with that, he'd always stop the conversation when we had a roadblock and say, hold on, what is the veteran's experience? Tell me what the veteran's experiencing. And then he'd back into that process. He'd back into that. And I just want to observe that I think for me, I think all the different cities, their stakeholders, elected officials have to look at this and think about how to approach this. But I am seeing our projects move forward. I'm seeing the conversations not shift drastically. I'm seeing us all enjoy the positive results that we've seen in our roles, and so for me, I do want to grab on that phrase, service resistant, because I don't use it, and we can't do our work without our police partners, especially we're mostly a property owner, right? So we really rely upon our law enforcement partners in all different ways and close relationships. But when I think of someone that is resistant, I see a mother with a child who doesn't want to go into that shelter because last time she was there, she felt she was attacked or unsafe, or she was attacked. I also have to observe that we are seeing some programs for ours where we've really shifted how we approach them and are getting huge results by simply going back and saying, well, why don't you want to work with us? What's the issue? What's the issue? And so I think I'm just kind of want to allow us just for a moment to speak to that there are complex dynamics underlying homelessness here, and that if we focus on clearing the parks, clearing the streets as a policy or as a narrative, as a conversation, we have let go of what we are doing so well, all of us together. And I just wanted to speak to how I think Orange County is doing a fantastic job. You're getting great results. And although we always talk about the point in time count is the top number going up and down, but structurally, if you look at it, you're seeing really strong positive results among the higher needs chronically homeless populations, while new people are coming homelessness because of the high cost of housing and this baby boomer demographic surge that we are not ready for right now, which we're seeing in all the studies coming out. So I just wanted to speak to that a bit. And, I just appreciate that there's the chance for us to recognize, and I hear this from my own volunteer board members, who work in our space and know many of you. They're concerned about the streets being cleared. They're concerned about the parks feeling safe. And the message that we come up with when we talk is great. Let's build more of the housing. that's deed restricted, makes permanent change, and let's make the structural infrastructure change and not miss the chance every year to build that housing and build the infrastructure and build in the linkages through the medical systems and so forth, so that in 2 or 5 years, we are in a better place to address those things. And so I just want to kind of share those thoughts because we have to watch what we say and think about how we can frame this positively, because we are doing well, we are doing good. So thank you.
Sure, Bruno Nelson.
Thank you. With CalAIM coming online 2 years ago, I like to think that that may have a little bit to do with the fact that 95% of the folks that identify are unhoused are receiving services. Because I think the dollars that Cal Optima Health has infused into the community through CalAIM has increased the number of providers that we have. We have a lot of housing navigation providers now. We had a handful in 2022. We have, I think we contract with 60 providers that provide housing navigation. That being said, the number one thing they complain about is thank you for the funding, and we're really glad to give folks services, but it's very difficult to navigate when you don't have any place to navigate someone to, which is why Cal Optima Health also invested millions of dollars into permanent supportive housing in the county to try to increase the housing stock. I think we're making progress. I think we're investing in the right places. I think people are working together, and it would be our hope that we would continue down that road.
Sure, Wyatt.
So I think, so we talked through, there's a couple of opportunities that we have that are active now that as we build on. First, we spent our time earlier talking about cold weather shelters. And we talked about two things that were sort of important with that group. One is that they're not just for cold weather, because there are times, I mean, even on 100-degree days like yesterday and other ones where these become, but there's other. It's an opportunity to do things more creatively and different than we've done in the past. And we talked about scattered, how they might work scattered, and we talked about the outreach, because if you scatter them, you need more scattered outreach that can reach them and work with them, I would say daily, and also some security issues to deal with that need to get scattered. So my thinking as we look at this is, as we work at this ad hoc committee and it not make it a temporary, but look at how that we be more creative on how our overall shelters work, and we come back to those resistant. That we need to understand some of the resistance to them, and some of it does have to do with location. Some of it has to do with the congregate as opposed to the numbers and feeling safe. And look at if we can solve that with the way we look at these shelters that are not made for long-term mass groupings, which is always the challenge anyway, because of the more. And in cold weather, we had one of our public speakers talk about not busing people in and busing people out, but we have the cold weather comes from across the county, and we end up having to move them all into one or two places, and that doesn't work very well for a whole variety of reasons. And so you end up busing them in and out, which has its own set of problems, including the resistance of the city who go, I don't need them. I don't need those ones that are coming in to be bused into my city. So anyway, I think there's an opportunity for that ad hoc committee to get really creative about solving the shelter problem, getting people in and dealing with their situation at the moment, understanding more about the resistance to being in shelters and why they're only using it temporarily, and just making that contact. We also have a group working on tiny homes, and we talked about last time that tiny homes are not a permanent solution. You can't house all of the people forever in tiny homes. So there's a flow model there too, just like there are in shelters. So you're moving people in, and now what happens next? Again, I think that is a group that looks about how you utilize them, not as an in solution, but as a temporary solution, and look at continuing how we expand our ability to house quickly, but then move on into them. as part of that. So I think there's a couple of groups going now that we could sort of expand what the length of their charter may be and what they're in, and then bring that up regularly in this commission so we could get feedback on a regular basis and brainstorm on some of these ideas that are coming up with these committees and really see if we could change how we work with homeless in a couple ways. I think we just have to get more creative in a whole set of ways. And I don't think maybe this change in the law will, as we rethink and cause us to go back. I don't think we can just simply, change. I mean, the very first time I got involved, the attorney who was advising me said, "You always have the law of necessity, right? It's been a law forever if something is necessary," and we still have to take into account that we can't do things. We can't overreact to a change, right? We have to have good programs as opposed to, being driven by lawsuits and fear of lawsuits. We really have to have creative programs. And I think we are smart enough to do it. We just have to set the forum up.
Okay, I'm going to give you the last word on this topic.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Vice Chair, and I want to answer one of your questions, which was, what are we doing? So the county and the Office of Care Coordination, and especially as I listen to all the comments, I really appreciate everyone's feedback and this dialogue. One of the things we're doing, and we always think really operationally, because that's part of our charter, is we're working with each city. We're reaching out to each particular city to understand where are the areas of concern that the city has, who are the people that are a part of that, and then most importantly, we're bringing together, and this is what we did through the Riverbed in Santa Ana, the Riverbed and the Civic Center, and we've done ever since, which is we're bringing together all of the important stakeholders, not only law enforcement and the property owners, but most importantly, the service providers. As someone who's also a homeless advocate, I get worried, like we all do, and jump quick to conclusions and generalities of, nervous that there will be a jump to just straight enforcement. And then I sort of had a realization, I play a big role in providing services here in the county. So if that is my concern, I need to make sure that in our role, we are bringing those services and those beds to bear to give every opportunity to work with folks. I think the important piece, and it was touched on in a few times, is we've been successful for quite some time because there's been a general alignment throughout the county between cities, regions, the county around addressing homelessness and working with homelessness. And grants pass, there's an opportunity here that sort of threatens that alignment and that could potentially have the impacts that was mentioned by Chairman Wagner and Chief Holly. And from our stance, the solution is being as proactive as we can. And what we've also found is that when we're talking about specific cases and we're talking about specific individuals and specific circumstances, it strips away sort of this high-level conversation, and almost always all of the people that are working in that group are not only focused on potentially, getting that encampment removed, but most importantly, brainstorming on how do we get help and services to the individuals in that encampment. Some of us are interested in, because we want to make sure that that individual's good, that individual's getting the services they need. And then there's a part of it that's important, that if we get them what they need, they will no longer be experiencing homelessness on the street, no longer be in encampments. So specifically to the question about what we're doing, and I'm hopeful, I've spoken to many of the folks around this table already in our efforts to work with each particular city and each particular stakeholder to identify areas of concern and to work together. But I'm hopeful that this conversation continues that, not only amongst the county and the folks around this table, but is an invitation for others to reach out to ensure that we are following that strategy.
Okay, thank you, Doug. On that note, thank you, Ms. Knapp, for your presentation. And we'll move to the action item on today's agenda. Madam Clerk, please read the next item.
Yes, item 3 is to approve the Commission to End Homelessness minutes from the June 19th, 2024 regular meeting. And we have one request from the public to speak on this item. Our speaker is Michelle Darmany. I believe the speaker just left. She's not in the room.
Okay, so I just need a motion to approve.
Move approval.
Yeah, which from the supervisor, and second from Commissioner Cunningham. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So that concludes our agenda item for today, and we'll now move to commissioner comments. Commissioner Hurst.
I just wanted to say I'm a member of the Bylaw Ad Hoc Committee, and Commissioner Wyatt made reference to that in his earlier remarks. I just wanted to report we had a fantastic first meeting. The engagement was strong, the energy was high, and the enthusiasm for the potential impact this commission can have on future homeless efforts in Orange County is off the charts. So I just wanted to build on that and thank all participants. I personally am not familiar with the activities of the commission in years past, like Commissioner Wyatt referenced, but I can say from those I talked to, the enthusiasm about our potential impact in the immediate near future is super strong, and I'm honored to serve with each of you. Thank you.
Commissioner Morse.
I would like to thank Kelly Bruno Nelson for appointing me to the Costa Mesa Street Medicine team. And you should all be seeing this on the news tonight. Maybe Kelly would like to speak to what went on this morning.
Thank you, Commissioner Morse. Today, Cal Ultimate Health was excited to have a press conference to announce the start of our second street medicine program in Costa Mesa. Our first program started 16 months ago in the wonderful city of Garden Grove, and the success of that program has resulted in its expansion into 2 additional cities. So today, and by the way, street medicine color is orange, which is why I'm wearing orange today. We had our conference today and started the program in Costa Mesa, and we'll be doing so in Anaheim in the coming weeks. Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay. Well, that concludes this meeting of the Commission on Homelessness, and we're now adjourned. And our next regular scheduled meeting will be held Wednesday, October 2nd, 2024 at 1 p.m. And I just want to note to the chairman that I got you all out of here ahead of time. So thank you.